Welcome to Wood Talk. Now here are three guys who, if combined, would make one hell of a woodworker. Marc, Shannon, and Matt.
Well, what's up, everybody? It's show number 572. And on today's show, we're talking about how not to take a summer vacation, table saw flatness, coping with cross-eye dominance, wet legs, and plywood voids. But before we get to that, we want to let you know that the show is proudly sponsored by you and a whole bunch of crappy ads. Woo! But mostly you guys. You're the bread and the butter. Wait, no, I'm just gonna move on.
What are you making
and Matt's
here?
gonna tell you. I had some analogy that had to do with food. It just didn't pan out. Okay, so Matt, why don't you tell them how they can help support the show?
If you want to help support the show, you can absolutely, totally do so. You can go to patreon.com/woodtalk and sign up to become a patron of our beautiful, wonderful, adorable show that we do here. This time,
Occasionally,
whenever we feel like it. This time,
sometimes.
well, Marc reminds us. All right, so this time, we're going to thank some people. You got a nice list here. We got Nick Saunders, Ben Minshall, Jim Freeman, Terry W., Duncan McDonald, Giles, Eli Boraz, Robert Cashman, Kyle Doss, and Michael Jenkins.
Nice. That's awesome.
And apparently you can get an ad-free version of this show. So
What?
Yeah.
just you and not
How
all
is
the
this
crappy
possible?
ads?
No
Wow.
crappy ads. I actually need to listen to the latest show to find out what those crappy ads are now. Like, have they changed, or are they the same like crappy ads we had before?
This one had Deadpool. What's his name? Ryan
Nice.
Reynolds. And his
about
is,
Mint Mobile or
yeah, like
Or-
a cell
or
phone ad
the-
that I
the
had.
Gen-
That's the
yes.
one I got.
okay, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
like
hear
I said,
that one all the time on other podcasts.
Right. If they have it, we probably do too.
You can get
Yeah,
that
it's all
ad-free
good.
version by becoming a patron.
That's true.
A little perk. I'll read your
And-
read your silly name, and then you don't have to listen to ads anymore either.
Yep.
Jeez,
That's
what's your
just a-
silly name?
It's a
Look at
Wood
those
Talk promise
perks.
right there. Well, you'll get the weird roll into like the mid-roll portion where we pause so that we
Yes.
can actually insert an ad there.
You'll get
It's
the
just there won't
whole-
be anything, and it will just come right back. It's going to be great. You don't even have time to go to the bathroom with that one. Okay, so
Take us
look,
with you.
yes, you could.
No.
The last episode that we published, some may not realize that last episode was actually recorded in May. And we had screwed up because we actually recorded 2 shows that month. And somehow I forgot and no one else noticed that we never published the second show. So the show that we
You
released...
say that like we don't always record 2 shows that month. We've recorded 2 shows for a month for like, what, 6 years now?
Yeah.
There's no excuse.
And
We
sometimes
just
3 shows
didn't
a month.
publish it.
When we had
So we did.
yeah,
No,
right.
we finished the recording and we said, hey, what do you guys think about taking a summer vacation? Like we used to do that prior to having ongoing sponsors. So why not? Let's take a little break. Everybody agreed that we should. And then my brain went on vacation, even though I didn't go
Yeah.
on vacation. My brain
There
did.
was like one of those like comic strip, like puff of smoke. Marc said,
Yes.
what do you think about taking a vacation? And it was like, there was a little sound effect.
Gone.
The and Matt
Everybody's
was
gone.
gone. A little puff of smoke, you know.
chairs is sitting there spinning empty.
Done and done. So this is our first, right? Exactly. This is our first official, show back from the summer break as we get into the new year, into the fall, pretty soon of 2024. But I feel bad. I feel really bad about what happened. I feel like we did you guys dirty because even with the, we decided we were going on vacation. We never really communicated it very well. Did you guys notice that? We talking to these 2 knuckleheads here.
No,
we did not really communicate it at all, and it was just like word of mouth. Oh, I guess they're on vacation.
I think we've already established that when you suggested it, it was basically just gone. Like
Yes.
there was no
I
consideration.
completely forgot about Wood Talk altogether. Completely.
All
I
summer
don't
long.
Not
think
even
it
a thought in my
helps.
mind.
I don't think it helps that we all 3 of us actually took vacations, but at different times.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
like
true.
I went on vacation like days after we recorded the last time, like in early June. And then like Marc, you went on vacation sometime in July.
It was in July. Yeah.
And Matt, you went somewhere very recently. So they were perfectly staggered. Right. So even if we wanted to record, it would have ended up being nope, can't do it. Marc's out, Shannon's out, Matt's out. So yeah, it's
very true.
We took a summer vacation and each of us staggered our vacations. It's bad.
Well, I have to say the lack of communication is shameful. We are sorry for it. So much so that I thought it would be appropriate to have an apology letter drafted up by the law office of Krenov, Maloof, and Vanderlist. And I just want to make sure we're covered here legally. I don't want to have any liabilities. So official apology letter is coming now. Dear Wood Talk listeners, we are sorry that we forgot to let you know that we were taking a summer break. It must have slipped our minds while we were knee-deep in sawdust and contemplating the existential nature of kickbacks. We know you eagerly await our musings on the joys of woodworking and the finer points of epoxy, so we can only imagine the heartbreak of tuning in to find silence. That's our bad. Rest assured, we weren't lost in the wilderness or trapped under a pile of unsold maple. No, we were simply taking a well-deserved rest, sharpening our wits and chisels for the next batch of woodworking wisdom. But hey, at least you got a break from our endless debates on whether Matt really does prefer it hard, if Shannon's shaft really won't work in that hole, and if Marc's real name is actually Trixie. We hope your ears enjoyed the respite. For now on, we do promise to give you a heads up when we decide to go AWOL. Until then, keep your joints tight, your blades sharp, and remember that silence from us is just our way of making sure that you miss us more. Stay snarky, stay dusty. The Wood Talk team.
Beautiful.
Wow.
I think Matt's crying.
Beethoven just rolled over in his grave.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. So I think that's all we can say about that. We do honestly think that we should be a little bit more open and communicating with you guys to let you know when things like that are going to happen. But
I believe the word you used was professional.
yeah, I did.
Yeah, that's right. I remember laughing really hard when he texted us this afternoon. It's like, we should be more professional. I was like, wait a minute, who is this?
I mean, we just really went off the rails. Once there was no more Rockler, it was just F it all. We're just having fun. But people count on the show, they look forward to it. They want to know when it's happening, when it's not. I totally get that. So we'll be better. We'll be better about it. Okay, well, let's get into the show proper. Yeah. Matt, you want to hit this first announcement here?
Yes, I will. This is very exciting. Woodworking in America has possibly returned because it hasn't quite happened yet, but it is returning.
It stopped quitting.
It'd be a surprise.
They followed on our footsteps and stopped quitting.
It has given up quitting. It is October 11th and 12th this year, and it's in Iowa.
Yeah,
which is pretty exciting.
You guys remember Woodworking in America? That was the Woodworker show.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
The golden age of online woodworking.
It really was something else. It was one of my favorite places to go back in the day. And this time, what's different about this is, so Woodworking in America was a popular woodworking event back then, the magazine. Well, now everybody owns, the same company owns all of them. So
now
this is a collaborative. This is a collaborative effort between Pop Woodworking, Fine Woodworking, and Woodsmith, which is not as crazy awesome as it sounds to people who were following woodworking back then. To hear that, a combination event like that, a collaboration like that would have been unheard of back then.
Yeah,
they all just had their own competing events back in the day. But they're all under the same umbrella company, so now they're joining forces, and this should prove to be an awesome event. So if you want to check it out, we'll put the link in the show notes. But just a quick note, Matt is teaching a course there, and I am teaching a course there. So very clearly... Yeah, they got me. The bar has been lowered.
Man, you were just a sucker. I don't know what's going on with you. You said, I ain't doing anything. I have no desire to teach. And then now you're like, I guess I'll do it. Yeah, why not?
Well, let me clarify. I have every desire to teach from my shop.
You know what I mean? I want to go anywhere to teach.
I don't want to do any seminars. I don't want to travel. Well, it's maybe in America.
You could broadcast in live. You can do a live stream to Woodworking in America, and people are going to sit in a room and watch a projector.
People would love
to
do
one of those telepresence robots, an iPad on wheels to roll around.
Yeah. That'd be great. I ordered a pizza like that once at a pizza place.
Nice.
I had an iPad for a face and it delivered the pizza. It was great.
So
Speaking
Matt,
summer vacation,
now that Marc is, he's gotten roped into teaching, he's doing something he wants to do. What's the odds on another Wood Whisperer book?
How dare you?
Good point.
Jill, don't
good
even.
point.
Yeah,
it is that
he's giving in all over the place. I think it's time for a book.
I mean, you're probably due for it. It's been you've forgotten the pain and agony.
Do they still sell books? I mean, really? Well,
I don't know. You tell me you're an author. Now? Aren't you an accomplished author? Shouldn't you know books still sell?
That's what my About page says. I don't know.
All right. So what you're saying is your books don't sell? Oh, that's sad.
Oh, boy. All right. Well, it's going to be a fun event. If you don't come to see me or Matt, there's a bunch of other instructors and people who are doing some of the seminars there, which you could find at the link that we are going to put in the show notes.
So what is your class going to be?
Seriously. Yeah, I want to know. What are you teaching?
Well, speaking of a book, it's going to be
hybrid woodworking.
Yes, it is.
Better not be hybrid woodworking. God,
it is. It is.
God, that's almost as stupid as building with slabs.
I was just going to say, are we not playing our hits here, Matt?
It's your turn. We're talking about you right now.
Okay, I'm just making sure because I feel like we both kind of
my time is coming. Okay, let's deal with you first.
Yeah, mine is going to be hybrid woodworking for hand tools for the power tool woodworker in that approach. So, what unique thing will you be talking about, Matt?
I will be talking about getting furniture parts out of slabs, cutting up slabs instead of using them whole.
No, I've never heard you discuss this before.
Like a monster.
What a novel idea.
Some kind of animal. Yeah,
I came up with this idea. Completely novel. Never done before.
Let me address the elephant in the room and say that I will not be at Woodworking in America, but that's not why they didn't ask me to teach. They didn't ask me to teach because...
You're not going to be there?
Why would they? I got nothing to add. No, this is Woodworking in America was always so much fun. Yeah, that's it. I'm an OG woodworking.
Well, let's also be clear. They planned this very last minute. There was for an event like this, almost no notice.
Are we supposed to make that public?
Well, I think everyone knows because they go woodworking. What now?
Shannon, the fact that they announced it like a month before it comes out. Yeah, I want to be in the country.
Yeah, already planned.
It's always been difficult because, interestingly enough, Woodworking in America has always been middle of October, which is when my wedding anniversary is. And I will give my wife credit. She's been to Woodworking in America almost as many times as I have, and honestly has fun. Like, woodworkers are really fun people, and she's got great memories and can still, like... My wife and Vic Hubbard are like this. They're tight. Like those two guys get along so well. Tom Pritchard, another WIA, OG. She and my wife and Tom had these great conversations. Nick Brown, another one. They'd have more conversations than I did. So, but this year is my 25th wedding anniversary.
Oh, it's a milestone.
It's kind of like, well, we never do anything for our anniversary. Yeah. Like hey, maybe we'll order food in tonight. It's our anniversary.
DoorDash,
hey, honey, we're hitting drive-through and we're doing it twice. So we just decided to do something, and I will be in Paris. Actually, while not completely goofing off, but I haven't even announced this on the Lumber Update, I have made contact with somebody at Notre Dame. So I will actually be visiting. Technically it should be fully open. Actually, no, I think December is when they're talking about it. I have no idea what kind of access I'm going to have, but I'm meeting with one of the curators and we're going to talk about the woodworking and stuff. So that's, I won't be entirely goofing off, but at the same time, cool. I am so psyched. So psyched. So
that's great, man.
So
are you going to cycle while you're there? Any European cycling?
I wish, but no, I think that would be too difficult to do. It's also fall and the weather is not that great. No.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good. Have a good trip.
I will. But seriously, I'm really bummed. Like, I'm going to miss it because it's always such a good show. So I can't wait to hear, especially from the OGs. I know a lot of people who have been since 2008 who are going. So I'm really curious to hear how it comes together.
Our buddy Wilbur Pan is presenting there as well.
Yeah, he's teaching. Another original idea for him, something about Japanese woodworking tools.
Right, typical. So typical. Whatever. All right, what's the next event we have here? I think, Matt, you must have put that
I was reading about Woodworking in America. Oh, yes. At the same time, the Minnesota Woodworkers Guild is putting on their Woodworkers Expo, which they've done 5 years now. It's always quite a nice thing to go and see. That is at this year. It's actually even bigger. It's at the state fairgrounds. So that's October 12th from 9 to 4. There's like presenters and demos and exhibitors and vendors. And it's one of those woodworking fair expo thingies. It's a Woodworkers Expo.
It sounds very exciting.
How do you think they feel about woodworking in America competing for the same time slot? Especially because they probably have had it planned for like a year.
Yeah,
they have. Yes.
The Minnesota Woodworkers Guild, and they're like, what the heck?
Our local Woodcraft has like a outdoor parking lot expo type thing that they do every year, which is also that weekend. So
it's a popular weekend.
Yeah,
I don't know.
That weekend.
Everyone's decided like that weekend was the good weekend to do their event for some reason.
I don't know.
It's
weird. Okay, are you guys
I did
ready?
it first 25 years ago.
Bunch
of posers.
Good point.
But ding ding. My anniversary sometime in October as well. I should probably look into that.
Oh, yeah, mine too. Do we all have October anniversaries?
Everybody gets married in October. What are you going to do? All right, so you guys ready for the next and probably final edition of the Great Kitchen Race Update?
Well, it's the final one because you won. Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's done. I mean, you still get to limp to the finish line, but the race is over.
Oh yeah, I'm circling the drain. Mentally.
I really thought this might go on longer. I didn't expect to only have like 2 editions of this thing, but hey, Todd found some good music, so I'm sure he's playing it right now for us.
Nobody cares. Once Pogacar puts 5 minutes into number 2, nobody cares.
Exactly.
Sorry.
Totally
Cycling
agree.
Cycling joke.
It's one that I kind of feel bad that I actually get it. All right. So my kitchen's done. Thank goodness. There's not much for me to say about it because it's like I paid to have a kitchen done, right?
I wasn't expecting to beat that.
No, that was never the point. It was more of just like, isn't it nice to have a sink, Matt?
I have a sink. It's in the other room.
I take exception with that, Matt, because my house still isn't done. I now have siding and a roof and doors, but I still don't have windows. And we are approaching 19 months since the deposit was put down. So, sometimes there's a chance that you could still win.
Oh, you never know.
Changing the contest now. That's great.
Yeah, right. I haven't actually
tag in Shannon.
Door.
Double team coming up and down he goes.
Right. Yeah, actually, I'm out. So you want to jump in? Totally fine. So I'm sure you might get into some of this in your What's on the Bench, Matt. But can you give us just a quick overview?
Or we can do it now. I don't really care.
All right, do it now then.
I don't know. Whatever you want.
No. I said do it now. Where are you at? What's going on? What are you making?
Good. Yeah. I am almost to the end of my doors marathon, or it might be like a triathlon at this point. They're out in the paint shop. I just gave them they had 1 coat of top coat. I just went through and sanded them all again. So they're ready to be resprayed for the second coat. And I have to do that again, do the third coat. And then the doors are done, which has been quite a journey.
Let me ask you a question real quick.
Yes.
During that process, I know when it happens to me, when I have too many things to do and it's taken too long. And you got to sand the coat, you got to sand the first coat, sand the second coat. Do you start cutting corners at all? And maybe you didn't sand it as good as you would have on the first set of doors. I mean, it's got to be dragging on you, mentally at this point.
The nice thing is that it's so many coats that if you feel like slacking off for 1 coat, you can always catch up again on the next one. So it's not too big of a deal. And really the initial sanding, getting through the primer and leveling, once you get through that, if you do that well, the other one's just scuff sanding.
So you're chasing the last 5% with those other sandings.
Yeah, you're just knocking down any unevenness that you might have in your finish because you sprayed it poorly and just kind of knocking the sheen off of it. You're not really doing anything to remove any defects or issues on it. So it goes a lot faster, but it's still I don't really want to stand in there sanding a door. I sanded all 16 of them all the way through with the primer. It took me 8 hours to do all the doors, to sand them all. This batch, I kind of do an hour at a time, and I did it in 3 hours. I did 3 1-hour sessions and got through all of them. So it's much more tolerable, but I'm like, I don't really want to spend that much time out there sanding and doing nothing else besides that. And I'm not in a huge rush to get them fully painted other than to have them done. Because if they can go in now or they can go in at the end, doesn't really matter. At least the doors are made and ready to go in when they're ready to go in.
Sure. Okay.
But that's where that one's at.
Did you do that? I saw just the other day you were doing that diamond pattern into the panel. Did you do that on all of them?
No, that's just on
that
the
was just a couple
base.
doors, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's what I did in between the sanding sessions is I made those doors. So I'm like, I have to work around the room and still get rid of all the little detail things I haven't done yet. And those 2 doors were one of the many things that are still on the to-do list that are kind of independent, small projects that have to get done. And they're primed and sanded and ready for top coating as well. So when I top coat the other doors, I'll top coat those doors as well. There'll just be one coat behind all the other ones.
Oh, okay.
And since everything is the same color, the next time I spray top coat, they'll get their 3rd coat and be done.
Nice.
So just kind of getting them into the paint shop queue rotation thing.
Right.
I thought about you the other day. I went to a paint shop, and they have a powder coater for MDF.
Oh, cool.
I'm sorry, it's just the coolest thing ever. Like the speed with which this thing powder coats. And I mean, the finish can be, I think of powder coated like metal, and it's got that almost like what we would call an orange peel feel to it. This can do that, but it also can make it look like automotive, like
cool.
shiny, glossy, or somewhere in between.
Yeah. How's
literally
the prep work on that kind of stuff for MDF, like on like cut edges? Because like when I'm doing anything with cut edges, like those diamond things, oh my God.
Usually I used to like use like spackle to like seal it, and then put paint over it. They use like essentially a glue size, but it's a UV cure thing. So they dip it. And I think there's also a reactant. I should know more about powder coating, but to allow the powder to stick.
Yeah, I guess
so they dip the whole thing in.
Because with metal, it's charged. So how does it?
Yeah. That was my thought. Is like, well, how are we charging the MDF? I've got some brochures and stuff on it, but the crazy part is they put them on hooks like most people have, like, an eye hook or something on the end grain, and they hang it. So from hanging to fully dry and like ready to be packaged is 110 seconds. This is awesome.
Wow.
It's just awesome. And like the number that they can send through. Oh, it's ridiculous.
You can't beat that. Like that's
Matt, you going to get one?
I mean, it's kind of
right. Yeah.
I'm kind of past that now.
Oh,
yeah. It's a bit late now.
Good timing, Shannon. Thanks.
Well, like I said, it up now.
I thought about you, but I didn't. I thought about you enough to go, I probably shouldn't tell Matt this until later. But yeah,
that sounds cool.
The stuff that's out there in like the industrial space, all these companies that make, cabinets, boxes for a living. It's just ridiculous. But yeah, powder coated MDF.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, I don't know how they got
Fun
the
stuff.
stick. Huh.
Well, tell us more about it when you find out more.
Sure. Yeah, I'll
interested.
Brochures at my office. I'll dig it up and show you how they do it.
Do a lumber industry update on it.
Probably, yeah.
Do a whole episode.
The MDF industry.
Yeah. So speaking of the lumber industry update, what do you have going on in your shop lately?
Oh, are we on to that? Okay.
Yeah, we are.
I guess that
Matt
was on the bench.
We're going backwards now on the list.
I can talk more about kitchen stuff if you want, but I think doors is good enough.
It's an interesting answer because it's not an easy one. I had doors taking up like 90% of my shop space. Those are finally installed. So I was able to get back to work on a pretty big plywood project that I started like 6 months ago. And I just have not had the room to do it. It's it's like a storage cubby thing, actually very similar to the like crate looking things behind Dougie and Marc's video.
I got you.
So there's a series of like fabric crates that fit into it. And the idea, the lesson, if you will, that I'm trying to come up with is, how to build fine furniture with crappy plywood. So I'm specifically using big box import plywood. With the philosophy is, and this is with anything, right? As a hobbyist, we have the luxury of saying time is not money. We can do whatever. So the hard part with crappy plywood is just the amount of extra stuff that you have to do. You can't expect consistency in thickness. There's voids everywhere. But from my perspective as a hand tool user, none of that really bothers me because I'm not doing mass production. I don't have like a setup that I'm running across a table saw. I don't have a dado blade. Like everything is being done on a one-off perspective. And so far, I'm not really finding a lot of areas where it's like, oh, this is terrible. This is taking so much longer because of just the way that I work. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of a hypothesis. But the other thing is just how do you like dress up a turd? Essentially, like from a design perspective, what can you do to make cheap plywood
let
look
me tell you
more
the
like
story of
fine furniture? Yeah. How do you dress up a turd? Yeah. Episode 572, how do you dress up a turd?
Yeah.
But
well, I'm curious though, because like I'm actually doing a project that's made with crappy plywood. And I'm just sitting there doing some things today that I'm like, this is 100% being done only because I went with cheap plywood for this. That was like an intentional choice. And I was regretting it because I'm like, I always regret it. I always think in the beginning, oh yeah, let's just spend, it's, just a shop project, not fine furniture, not what you're trying to do. But even for shop furniture, I'm ready to burn this stuff. Like when I see voids and I just have everything warping, I'm just trying to put a drawer together. I just posted a picture on Instagram of like 40 clamps on one drawer, trying to get everything to just be square and flat and accept the hardware I'm about to put on it. So I can't even imagine doing it in the context of hand tools, but then also with, a fine woodworking element part of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have to revisit your joinery, but I mean, most plywood, most case construction is just dados, rabbets, and grooves, right? Mm-hmm. So when you're cutting each dado based upon the piece that's going into it, in other words, you're laying it out by tracing around the piece, like the inconsistency in thickness becomes no issue.
Oh, sure.
The voids where a router will eat it alive, a handsaw is fine with it.
Yeah, okay.
And chopping out the waste in between and using a router plane, it really, where that becomes a problem is when you run into voids and trying to get, a perfectly flat surface, the floor of the dados. But at the same time, I don't care because I'm going to cover up the floors of the dados.
Yeah.
Right.
Glue ups still suck. There's no way around that. Like everything's a bit of a potato chip. Everything is so bendy. People forget how flexible plywood is. Like as a structural member, it's terrible unless you're buying like, lumber core plywood. Mm-hmm. That's why it exists, because it's rigid. But like dressing it up, it's kind of that like I'm veneering the top and hardwood edge banding. So by the time the top is done, it's really nice. The edge banding on the front is all African Iroko, but it's specifically a thicker edge band. And I got fancy and made like bird's mouth joinery connections. So like you can do nice stuff as long as you don't do it on the plywood.
Yeah, everything but the plywood.
Like joining at the corners, at first I thought I would I actually thought about doing beadlock. Like Rockler sent us those beadlock things all that time ago. I was like, here's a reason to use it. And I did a couple of them and I was like, this is a bad idea. Because like, that close to the edge of crappy plywood, things just fall apart. Mm-hmm. So, you work around it, you change your joinery. But the other wrinkle to this, and I can't remember, I mean, this was going on when we last recorded, but like I tore up my knee back in March and got some questionable advice on how to recover from it that basically set me back a long, long way. So at this point, shop time for me is still very limited. Standing in my shop, after about 15 minutes, my knee swells up like a cantaloupe. So it's weird because as long as it's the way my shop is structured, like everything in a hand tool shop is centered around the workbench. So it's a lot of stationary work. Ironically, I've been doing a fair bit of turning on my pedal driven lathe. And like my rehab is ride my bike, moving it, keeping it moving it, keeping it flexed, keeping it stretched is actually what I'm supposed to be doing for rehab. Standing at a bench is like the worst possible thing. It's terrible. So like I find that my shop time runs in like a 15-minute spurt with like an hour of letting the swelling go down or something. That's been really frustrating. And it's getting better now because I finally got into physical therapy. But yeah, that was the story of my entire summer. I had these great ideas to do stuff in the shop and I'd get down there and I'd be like, oh my God, this hurts. So yeah, it sucks getting old.
Bummer, man. That does suck.
I'm coming out of it. I'll be fine.
Okay. So for my thing, it's nothing big. I just kind of alluded to it. I am working with some plywood, making a under table saw cabinet deal for the the right wing of the. It's a bad way to.
That's been on my
word
to-do list or things I wanted to do for a long time. So I'm glad to see you doing it.
Yes, mine too. And here's the funny thing. I was like trying to remember the history of this because I know I built one in the past and I had pictures of it and I had to kind of refresh my memory on why I made it, but never got to use it. So this is going back to like 2008, just started working with Powermatic. And one of the folks at Powermatic that I was working with said, hey, they were like, that was when they started to make the workbench extension wing. Do you guys remember that on some Powermatic saws?
I do.
Yeah.
So I think they were kind of experimenting with what things can we sell as accessories with our saws. So they came to me and asked me if I would design a, plywood based the cabinet under there. And I did. I sent them the prototype and all I had to show for it was pictures. So the problem was I had built one. And I think that's why it's always been something that I never wanted to build again because I did build it and then I never got to use it.
So I've already done this.
Internally, I was like bitter about it or something. I'm like, I'll get to it eventually. So that time has finally come. And I am just kind of, putting a couple drawers, some place for some blade storage and nothing too fancy, cheap plywood. Paid $50 for the sheet of 3/4 inch plywood that I use. I don't think I've paid $50 for a sheet of plywood in ages. And I'm paying the price every day as I cut that stuff.
So how's that
what's particularly interesting for me is the plywood that I'm using. I bought it, actually, the stuff that is in my shop walls, it's the same plywood, except that the stuff on the shop walls was pre-finished one face. And I also ended up with some unfinished both faces stuff. When did I do my shop? And we were talking like 8 years ago, probably. And I've been hanging on to these half sheets of plywood. I'll find something to do with them. And this is what it is. But I bought them 8 years ago for $19 a sheet.
Nice.
There's where the plywood market has gone. $19 a sheet, which still kind of blows me away. I mean, and that wasn't like, my super secret, discount because we don't carry this plywood. But like that's the state of the import plywood market. And today it's $50 a sheet. I've seen 60 actually in some places. Ridiculous.
Wow. Okay. Well, we got time for a dumb joke. You want to hear one?
Always.
Okay.
Yep.
Here it is. What advice did the woodworker's lawyer give before a big glue up? Better saw call. That joke was by Raymond Caparoon. Thank you, Raymond, for the joke. Really appreciate it.
Where's my sad trombone soundbite?
Otherwise, we'd have no content for this show.
That's the problem.
That might just be the highlight right there. Thank you, Raymond. All right, so we're going to take a break, and we're going to pay some bills. And after we pay those bills, we'll be coming back.
Maybe we'll come back. Who knows?
Well, you never know. We might go on a fall vacation.
Let's go out to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Have ourselves a snack.
All right, so we're back. Exciting stuff.
We're back.
That was quick.
It was quick.
Yeah.
It was almost like instantaneous for us. Weird.
Almost.
I blacked out.
It doesn't take much. He's a very tired man.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get to our questions. We've got a few hot ones burning a hole in the inbox here. So I've got a question here from Jason Stromberg. He says, in a recent YouTube video, Marc said that he's right-handed and left eye dominant. So am I. I have a terrible time trying to cut straight lines with hand and power tools. On my bandsaw, I do pretty well if I stand back far enough, workpiece permitting, and concentrate. But the moment I relax, I wander to the left. With handsaws, I tilt left and pull left, no matter what I do. I've tried closing my left eye and sighting with my right, but I still pull to the left, sometimes worse. I have the same issue with trying to chisel straight down for mortises. I've noticed the same issue with kitchen knives. I always pull left. I've looked online for tips to try to correct this, but all I could find are tips for shooting guns or just get used to using my left hand. That doesn't work for me. Do you guys have any suggestions? So this is interesting. Did we talk about this on the show at all? I know I discussed this recently, what he's talking about on YouTube.
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so there was a guy, what is it? Newman something or other, I think, on Instagram. He was talking about why... What is it?
Newman.
No, not Newman. Newman.
Newman.
But no, not that Newman. Different Newman.
Hello, Newman.
He was talking about why he has his table saw fence on the other side of the blade. Like most of us keep it to the right of the blade. He puts it to the left of the blade. And he was explaining that he has an eye dominance issue where that just makes it easier for him to line up his cuts. Makes more sense for him. And it reminded me of something I discovered about 2 years ago when I learned a thing called cross-eye dominance. Have you guys heard about this? So this is the situation that Jason's describing. It is most often discussed when you're talking about shooting, because the average person just kind of naturally goes to the eyeball that makes the most sense. Whereas if I'm holding a gun to shoot and sight down, I need to use my left eye, even though I'm right-handed. So now my right eye, which is actually in a better position for aiming, isn't the eye I'm going to use to aim. So it's funny too, because I often thought about how this has impacted other things that I've done. When I play golf, I slice like a mother. Like I always pull when I hit the ball, no matter what I do, I slice. And it's exactly what he's talking about. And part of it, I'm wondering if it is that cross-eye dominance. So I don't know of any specific tips, but this is something I discovered late in my woodworking career. And now I can actually use it as an excuse for why I suck. But I've actually obviously found ways around it, because I can hold my own in the shop. I can make stuff that's, straight and accurate. But I think it has just been a brute force thing, because that's all I know. I didn't even know I was cross-eye dominant. I just knew, when I aim and I close one eye, it's always my left eye that's open when I'm really focusing on something. But it is interesting to see how that now impacts things that we rely on being able to sight down a line. Everything you do, Shannon, you draw the line, you cut to the line. Well, what if your eyes are switched up and the aim, the hand you're holding the saw in is no longer the eye that you use to do the lining? Suddenly you're kind of looking from a few inches over to the other side. It can screw things up. So I guess I'm throwing this out there that if there are any people who have confronted this in the shop and knew about this going into it, and you find that this causes a problem for you, do you have any fixes? Do you have any advice, techniques, things Jason can do to practice, other than just brute force, which is what I've done? I think I've just managed to kind of find my way around it and adjust for the fact that I always see it. And I look at the result, I go, okay, that didn't come out right, so let me adjust the next time I do it. And I've somehow figured out, for the most part, how to do it. But it kind of does explain some struggles.
I have some advice, unless you were just asking the listeners.
No,
for advice.
I don't want your advice. No,
because I've confronted this a lot, actually. One of the things that I do on a pretty regular basis with hand tool school members is hand sawing consults. I'm always throwing it out there. Like I have this little thing that says, give me 10 minutes and I can fix your sawing, because 9 times out of 10, it's usually a really easy fix. And this cross-eye dominance thing comes up a lot. What was interesting in reading Jason's email is I'd never thought about it from a power tool perspective, because that's like, you set the fence and you just hold it up against the fence. But on a bandsaw, I never really thought about that. And I think it might actually be exacerbated on a power tool simply because things cut faster, you know? A bandsaw cuts a heck of a lot faster. And if you're, doing it or even like a scroll saw, I can imagine that would be a bit of an issue. But the biggest issue that I've found in correcting this is the answer is you really don't need your eyes as much as you might think. And I know a lot of blind hand tool woodworkers who will tell you, no, it's not necessary. But for those of us blessed with sight, we've come to rely on it so much. And, there's all this, I'm constantly saying, if you can see the line, you can saw the line. But some of that is a bit of a, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not a literal translation. Being able to saw straight really has very little to do with your eye position. It all has to do with your body position. Are you creating a straight line from the spine of the saw to your wrist, to your elbow, to your shoulder? And more importantly, when you're setting up, perfect example, like at a bench hook with a back saw, and you're setting up to make that cut, look and see. It doesn't matter whether you're left eye or cross-eye dominant or whatever, you can see, is my wrist broken or is my wrist straight? Is my wrist in line with my elbow? Is my elbow in line with my shoulder? And if you set that up and then position your feet so that you're standing comfortably, because I find a lot of people will do this and they're like, wonky and off balance. And the minute they start sawing, that all, falls apart. You set that coplanar nature from saw all the way to your shoulder, and then position your lower body, your stance, your footwork to be perfectly comfortable. And you can close your eyes and saw all day long. But the one thing, and that's so much easier said than done. But then what I tell people to do, and this is why it works really well to start doing this with a back saw, because the more you get used to, this is going to sound very like hokey and like hooey, but like feeling square. Like if you do this enough, you will get over it. Your body will learn, and you'll actually be able to feel when I'm sawing correctly. And it's, if you're sawing out of alignment, the saw will bind. It'll sound very different. I say it usually growls versus kind of a more of a soft shushing noise. But the reflection of the saw plate, and this old trick of look at the board, look at your line in the reflection of the saw plate. And if the reflection is not, sorry, how do I describe this not without a visual? You're putting your saw down on the board and you see the edge of the board reflected in your saw. If that board edge in the reflection deviates from a straight line to reality, so like the line of the board should enter the saw and the reflection should be exactly coplanar. If your saw is off 90 to that line will bend. The reflection of the line will bend. Likewise, if the saw is not perfectly plumb, standing up vertically, that line will bend in the reflection. It doesn't matter at what angle you're looking at. So if you're, cross-eye dominant, you're working with your right hand, yes, your left eye is kind of out of the way, but you can still see that reflection. So you set your coplanarness of your arm and your shoulder, and then you look at that reflection and you adjust till it gets to a straight line, and then you double check your alignment and you start sawing. If you get in the way, and this is the whole idea of gripping the saw too tightly and trying to saw, you just need to let the saw do the work. And the more you kind of push it, the more those, I don't want to say inadequacies. That sounds judgy. That sounds very
How
judgy.
dare you, sir?
How dare you, sir?
Those misperceptions in alignment, I don't know, they just kind of fall away. And what kind of slows people down or throws people off is the first couple of times they do it, they're like, okay, I got it and it's working, but like stopping to do that alignment every single time, like that's ridiculous. Well, then you have to say, well, why are you in such a hurry? If you're in such a hurry, why are you using a handsaw in the first place?
Slow down, sucker.
But if you just get into the habit of checking that alignment before you start making a cut, you will feel the difference in how the saw cuts. You'll also like see it in the clock, because an efficient saw is going to cut a lot faster. With chiseling, the same thing can happen where you're trying to chisel the edge of a mortise, and I will often position your body in such a way that you can see square. Chiseling, like if you're chopping the end of a mortise, body alignment is not nearly as important there. So you can align your dominant eye so that it's in line, and your body could maybe be off to the right a little. That's not a problem. You might lose a little bit of leverage on the mallet because you're kind of chopping off to the side, which I think is great because people wallop on their chisels way too much. Like they hammer the crap out of them, and then they're like having to use a crowbar to get the chisel out of the wood. You've driven that chisel too deeply. Most of the time you just need to use a light little tap, tap, tappy on the mallet, to make it work. And that does not require the leverage that you got to be right over top of it. The other thing that you can do is just set a square on the bench. For the first 10, 20 times you do this, and eventually you will be surprised that 21st time you set the square down, you're like, oh, I'm already there. Because that muscle memory kicks in, but it's stopping for 2 seconds and aligning everything, positioning your dominant eye so that you can see square, and then chopping from there. So that's a little bit different than sawing, but 9 times out of 10 is just taking a second to align it. And what I do to kind of cement that is the first time they get it right, I say, okay, now do it 5 more times. Like, shut up, just do it. Just keep going, keep going. You'd be really surprised how little time it takes before that muscle memory, that Ingram kicks in, and you got it. The problem is, in a typical project, you're making drawers, so you cut dovetails in the drawers, and then you may not cut dovetails again for 6 months, or you may not pick up a handsaw and be forced to make that kind of precision sawing for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So getting into the habit of even just taking 5 minutes to warm up the sawing and paying attention to that body alignment, it will fix that issue. And you'd be surprised how little you actually rely upon your eye. And I can probably count 20, 30 people that I've had success who've had this. It's not an uncommon thing. And they've had success and they're still sawing well today. So
it's interesting.
That sounded very pat myself on my back. That's not what I intended.
No, people expect that from you. It's
wow.
But no, listening to you describe that, I'm listening because I'm curious. I can't identify what I've done because I didn't even know this was a problem for me until recently. So as I'm listening, I'm trying to kind of retroactively think, do I do it the way he's describing? How have I, gotten around the problem to get good results? And that's one of the things that I've noticed is the more I try to follow a line with a handsaw specifically, and probably dovetails, the more I try to follow a line, the worse I'm going to do. So where I have success is exactly what you're saying. I start it. I get it ready to go. I know I'm in a good position. I'm not too worried about the angle. I'm pretty good at aiming that angle. But once I go, it's just going. I'm not thinking about it after that point. If I do try to track, that's when I'm going to go off because the way I'm watching it live is a problem. So the interesting thing, though, you talked about this before, the the power tool component of this issue is going to be a little bit different because you can't exactly just close your eyes and go.
You don't have that feedback at all.
And you don't have the feedback. It's a lot faster, a lot of potentially more dangerous things can get out of control faster. So yeah, it's interesting. This is really interesting stuff.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see if anybody's had experience correcting this when it comes to cutting curves. Because I hadn't actually thought about it with a turning saw or a coping saw or something like that. To me, I don't try to follow a line, but I think any kind of, even a powered bandsaw, you'd be surprised how much you anticipate your curves. You got to start turning before you get to that curve.
Right.
And once you kind of get a feel for that, you get into this flow state and you're anticipating the curves and your smoothest cuts, you were not trying to curve it, not trying to turn. I don't know. I'd be really curious because I haven't tried to tackle that, scroll work or marquetry work or anything like that.
I'm going to try to pay a little more attention to just what habits I have around these tools to see if I can identify anything I might be doing, because I think this could be helpful. There could be people who just feel like they just can't get it. They have a problem getting these techniques down and it's easier for someone else. And it may not always just be natural ability. It could literally be that you can't aim very well when you do this type of thing. All right, Matt, you got the next one. You just can't aim well.
You just can't aim, I got kids that can't aim well either. Okay.
Oh, you ain't kidding, man. Don't do yourself a favor. Don't buy a UV light and take it into your bathrooms.
I don't have to. I have a nose. I don't.
Okay.
Nice.
The nose knows.
Your kids and my dog need to get together.
Oh, I'm sure they have a jolly good time.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we got a question from Charlie. Charlie is embarking on a tree to table project for a client, his wife. They felled a large cherry tree that needs to go for various reasons, and the sawyer that Charlie is working with is milling the apron and tabletop parts to 8/4 rough, and then the sawyer is going to be air drying and then putting in his kiln to be ready for use in 3 to 4 months. For the legs, we used quarter sawn stock from the same tree, but milled it to 3x3. I rough cut them down to 36-inch lengths. This stuff, he says, putting in his kiln would not help much. Yep. All this to say is when I'm ready to build my table, which would be ideally within 6 months' time, the leg parts will have a higher moisture content than everything else. So he's looking for some insider tips on what to do here with making this table with very wet legs. I want to tell you to just do it, but
just go for it.
There's a little bit more nuance to this as well. He says he just has the legs stickered in his shop right now. And I don't even know what part of the country you're located in, if your shop is air conditioned or if it's a super humid summer, and your moisture meter, unless you cut into the stock, is not going to be able to tell you what the core of that leg stock is anyway, unless you happen to have a very fancy one with a slide hammer on it. So a couple of quick things on how these things are going to dry, because they're going to distort as they dry. I think that's kind of the bigger thing you have to worry about. There's 2 things in my mind to worry about. The first one is going to be distortion. So the first thing is on this stock being quarter sawn, because it's a 3x3 square stock, it's not quarter sawn. You turn it 90 degrees, It's not perfectly plain sawn. So hopefully you didn't waste your time with the sawyer cutting it actually quarter sawn out of the log because
No. Do it this way. Turn it 90 degrees.
you could have gotten it just a plain sawn top piece and then just turned the blank. So anyway,
That's what the guy did. He's like, that'll be $50 extra.
yes.
Yeah.
Hopefully you didn't charge extra for quarter saws blank.
Did you get the undercoating on that quarter sawn 3x3 too?
Yeah.
So that's
The
Always
important.
extended
get the
warranty.
undercoating.
We get the extended
get the
warranty
undercoating.
on that too. Is that part of that? So when that stock dries, it's going to go from a square to a rectangle because it's going to dry more on the whatever face that would be. That would be the plain sawn. No, the quarter sawn faces
Tangential.
will come together. So that side is going to come in. So your square stocks become rectangles. So that can get kind of tricky and dicey if you do like a Morrison tenon, because that could distort the joinery as you're coming together. Because especially if you orient your legs differently from corner to corner, then it's going to like rack the table a little bit. Maybe not a lot, but it's something to consider. On the other hand, if these were actually if they're riffs on stock, those ones dry kind of weird. They turn to parallelograms because like the long corners, they squish together. The ones with the actual growth rings that run from corner to corner, they turn into like this like weird parallelogram diamond kind of shape. So that one would be even weirder because then it's really going to distort your joinery. You're going to go from nice square aprons to like some kind of weird, like depending on where you are, I guess, either an acute or an obtuse angle of your connection there. So that's kind of a weird thing to consider with these. The other like big consideration in my mind, the second thing would be if these are really wet and you have a dry tenon in there, this leg is going to shrink around that tenon and possibly end up cracking because it's going to try and shrink so much that tenon's not going to let it compress, and you end up with a crack running up your leg towards the mortises there. I mean, I don't know what joinery you're doing. I don't think you said what kind of joinery he's planning on doing.
He's asking you what joinery to do.
Yeah, this is a tough one. I took this question because I kind of did this on the island. The legs on my island were not actually dried enough to be indoors in the furniture. When I built the island, they were sitting at 16%, but that's kind of where they were at. I'm like, let's just see what happens. And they've been fine. However, my island doesn't have as much going on as a table. Those legs are kind of like, I don't know, they're in the corners or whatever. I guess they're
You're
legs.
also using
whatever.
white oak. Remember, it's all white oak too, isn't it?
It is all white oak, yeah. But I was a little worried about it. It hasn't really been that big of a concern in the grand scheme of things. So that's kind of where I'm like, if you kind of know what the moisture content ends up being, like if you can be like in the teens, like mid-teens, I think is fine. Just do it. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
You start getting like 20 or higher, I'm like, that scares me a little bit.
Seriously though, he's got 6 months for 3 foot long blanks. They're going to be below 20%. I don't care where you are. I think they're going to drop below 20%. I mean,
the
you
core
probably
will
want
not
to put
be.
some.
No way
Well,
the core is dropping that low.
You want to put some ventilation on them, I think, but you can.
Well, as soon as you
This is a
pop a
long
ventilation hole in the mortise, then that area is going to be drying up real nicely, at least.
Sure. Yeah.
So maybe you
Yeah.
cut some mortises, you let them dry. That's the other thing too, is if you like take your time with building your table, you're going to fit a Morrison tenon and you come back in a week and that thing ain't fitting in there anymore. That mortise is going to shrink.
I have 2 stupid questions.
I'm ready for
One,
your stupid questions.
is there a reason? You may not have the answer. It's a question
I don't.
for Charlie. Is there a reason you can't wait longer if you're going through this trouble? Is there a reason we can't wait longer? That would be very helpful. And then also what a lot of people do when you don't have access to super thick stock is just use the 8/4 stock and do a glue up. If you're still, I get it. It's nicer to have, no glue seam on those,
Yep.
but I'm just
And
thinking in terms
that
of
was my backup on
workarounds.
the island. It's like, if this doesn't work, I'll glue some stuff up. It's fine. But
Right.
I just,
Yeah. There's
This
lots
can
of ways
either
to glue it up and hide the seam too.
this can either go fine or it could go very poorly.
It's a risk. Definitely a risk.
And with all
I mean, I
like,
definitely think build the top first. And take your time.
take your time, yes.
Build the top, get the top
Still
all
working
together.
on
Hell,
that top.
you can
2026.
finish the top. Like you're going to finish the top separate from the base anyway. Finish the dang thing. Take your sweet time on that.
100%.
Give it more time to dry. But also remember, like a lot of chair makers rely upon differential moisture in order to lock tenons in. What you're talking about, Matt, where the dry tenon, like chair makers will use like a light bulb kiln to preternaturally dry their tenons with the idea that the moisture in the leg will swell the tenon. As the leg shrinks, that moisture goes into the tenon and swells the tenon, and that locks together way better than any draw bore could ever do. So,
I mean, as long as you don't exceed, the strength of the wood, then it cracks.
You
got like right there.
He's using cherry. He's using cherry, so you're not going to have as much room to play with.
This can be done. I just.
Well, Charlie, send us a picture of the cracked legs.
How many extra leg blanks do you have?
Interesting question, though. All right, Shannon, you're up.
Oh, right. Hey, this is from Lloyd. He says, I'm making a chest of drawers. Decided to go with plywood for the drawer boxes as they are larger and I want to avoid lamination. I went to my local lumberyard, was willing to dish out the 130 Canadian dollars for a sheet of 15 millimeter Baltic birch. I went to look at it before paying and there were voids visible in the core. Mostly small voids. When asking the lumber guy, he said that was okay. Of course he said it was okay. My understanding, I'm
perfectly
sorry.
normal.
I'm sorry. I work in this industry, folks. Of course he said it was okay. My understanding is that true Baltic birch is void free. Is this lumberyard trying to pull a fast one and misrepresenting the material? No, I don't think they're trying to pull a fast one, nor do I think they're misrepresenting the material. What's wrong with this statement is true Baltic birch. Baltic birch is a brand name. If you look up any plywood company, let's just forget about the brand name. We're just talking about, birch, shop grade, C grade plywood, CD plywood, probably. Any manufacturer of that, whether it's, States to Columbia Forest to Brunswick, to any of those guys, they're probably going to have 5 to 8 different products under that shop plywood or that birch plywood line. The difference from one panel to the next is so minuscule. Many times it has to do with the quality of the veneer. Sometimes it has to do with how uniformly dry the veneer is. Sometimes it has to do with what glue is used. The reason that there's so many different panels in the product line is because these plywood manufacturers are trying to use the entire buffalo. Like they have all this wood, and if you have some wood that won't literally make the grade for the $60 panel, they'll use it and make a bunch of panels out of it, and they'll mark it at $40. And when you look at the spec sheet, a lot of times the spec sheets, they put them in a big grid, and you can see the columns. Here's the glue used on all these seats, and you'll look down the grid, and it's the exact same glue used on all these 5 different products. And you have to look real close to see what that little distinction is. Sometimes you can't find one in the published specifications because it has to do with how dry the veneer was when it went through, or how fast the line was run to run that through. Or Margaret, the veneer checker, took that day off and they brought in, one-eyed Charlie, cross-eyed dominant Charlie to do the grading that day. And those panels are $30
Stop making fun of us. It's unfair.
Sorry.
We're people too.
All right. Fair enough. So this lumber guy, and lumber people are notoriously bad at plywood. Like plywood sellers, people who sell plywood, yeah, they're much better. Lumber guys, we don't understand. Like, because we don't have to touch it, we don't have to mill it, we don't have to dry it, we don't have to do anything. It comes in on a truck and we put it on your truck and it goes out. That's what happens. 9 times out of 10, they have no idea what they bought, but they know that they've met a price point that they were trying to hit. Some Baltic birch has voids. Some Baltic birch has a lot of voids, and some Baltic birch has 0 voids. What did you pay for it? Have you bought it before without voids? And what did you pay for it there? And there's your answer. You probably paid more for the 0 void stuff. No one's misrepresenting anything. Also, in this day and age when Russian birch is pretty much bad, you're having trouble getting it. So we're getting the lower quality stuff that probably has been in a warehouse for 6 years because everybody wants the really good stuff. And the plant has been making this lower qualities in air quotes because it's not that much different. But now, as the good stuff has run out, because we're not buying more Russian birch, they're selling the C grade stuff, and they're working their way through that material. And now you're seeing more of it. So,
and that's less than $100 US.
That's still
current conversion. That's pretty cheap.
Yeah, Yeah. So plywood is the Wild West. Look at your price points. If you've bought it before, see, this is the hard part because the price goes up so much. Like, you can't find $19 plywood anymore. You just have to ask yourself, what is important to your project? Can you deal with a little bit of voids? If you can't, then maybe you need to find another product, but you also have to understand that it may be impossible to find that other product. Yeah, the plywood market is full of smoke and mirrors, but not in like a devious way. It's just, truly, it's because they want to use all the material they have and they can't use that somewhat lesser material. Would you rather they throw that away?
Yes.
I'm sure they would rather, okay.
Get rid of it.
Yep.
Right. Burn it.
That's what I do.
Yeah.
All right. Got one more question here from Julio Ishkabibble. He says, Has anyone else had terrible flatness tolerances on their saw stop? I bought a 3 horsepower PCS and the left wing was 0.012 inches out of square. He says out of square. You think he means we're talking about flatness here?
I was reading this ahead and that part confused me.
Okay, so I think he must have just referring to flatness here.
Out of
0.0.
Yeah. Unless
12
he's talking
foul.
about where it's milled down the side where they butt up together, causing it to like.
Yeah.
Could
Okay.
Be. Could be. So when it's
possibly
when the wing is attached, it's not square. Yeah.
So he says, talking to saw stop support, they said that it was within tolerance. I banged on it enough to put my main table out of flat. So you might be right. Yeah. So he banged on it enough to put the main table out of flat by 0.005.
Oh,
so
like
5,000.
Trying to bend it or something.
Maybe. Yeah. I eventually convinced them to send a replacement, but it was 1.1 thousandths out of flat. Is it just me? So I put this in here and I don't.
11 tenths. Is that an extra zero or?
That's one, just a hair above 1,000th. To me. Yeah. So okay, we're on the same page. I mean, Julio, what you're hearing here is us not normally working with numbers this small.
I don't have anything to measure this tolerance.
What are these tiny numbers?
Do you work for NASA by any chance? Because
so this is something that I follow, like the Saw Stop group on Facebook, and I see a lot of rumblings about things like this level of flatness. I think from the three of us, you're probably going to find a more practical approach to this because let me tell you this. Do you know how far out my table saw top is? And I also have a 3 horsepower PCS.
I have no idea.
I don't know. Actually, it's not true. I didn't know until this afternoon.
You checked it?
For the first time,
I'm probably going to check it after this now.
You need to go check it. But I had to check it. I had to check it just so that I could have an example. Because the example would be, I can guarantee you, it is also not perfect. It's definitely not perfect. But I haven't really had to think about it. Why? Because you don't need that perfect dead flatness to produce awesome work off of your tools.
How do your cuts look? If your cuts look fine.
And I don't want to be that guy, especially in the Facebook groups where they go through a whole thing like this. I measured this, I did that, I got a replacement, blah, blah. And you go, have you built something yet? Like, did you notice a problem in your joinery? Are you seeing inconsistencies? Like anything at all? So I think that's where we're at here, Julio. I think it could be very easy to get bogged down in tolerances and flatness and perfection. I think you're lucky that they sent you a replacement in the first place. If I'm not mistaken, most table saw companies are perfectly fine with up to like 20 to 25 thousandths out of flat on their cast iron. Expecting more than that, I think personally is a little unreasonable, given what the tool does and how it works. So I did measure mine. I am relatively flat, no more than like maybe 10 thou in any kind of dip across the front, but toward the back behind the blade, I have a dip that's as much as 20, I think I went to 25 thou in the center. It's just got a nice dip down. You know what? I didn't know.
Really?
And now that I know, you know what I'm going to do? Nothing.
Yeah.
I'm going to go back to work and pretend I never saw it. And it isn't going to affect anything.
For some context here, I visited a composite decking company a couple of years ago. And in their test lab, basically their smash lab where they just break stuff, coolest job ever, they had a cast iron tabletop that was maybe slightly deeper than a typical table saw, typical stationary table saw with extension wings. It was about the same, length, but it was probably about 48 inches deep. It was flat to within 3 thousandths. And I think it was 2 inches thick. That table was $175,000. So how badly do you want it flat?
Yeah.
Julio, because you can get it that flat, but like, no. That
Take
costs
your
money.
saw to a machine shop and have them regrind the whole top for you.
Yeah.
But it's also cast iron, and cast iron can kind of sometimes move a little
It'll
bit.
move on you. Yeah.
So you can grind it flat. It may not stay that way.
Which is what could have happened to his table.
Exactly.
It was
That's the other
ground
thing.
flat
Like,
at the factory, and then
they checked it. It was flat. Now it's not once it gets to you.
Yeah.
I wouldn't worry about it.
I mean, I can't even imagine like what that would do to working at the saw. Nothing.
I mean, and
Like,
then
absolutely
just
nothing.
for perspective here as well, Julio, when you're looking at the top being 0.0011 at a flat, depending on the source, if you look for like how thick is a human hair, most of it that I've seen is like between 1,000th and 3,000ths. And you're
Not Matt.
concerned about one. You know,
Matt,
the thick
you're
stuff,
what? Like 1/10? Matt.
well,
Matt's
yeah.
got-
He measures his hair thickness in inches.
Yeah, like you
Full inches.
let's say you're cutting a sheet of plywood and there's a few specks of dust or like a chip or something on the table.
Yeah.
And you put your plywood on, like it's the same.
Yeah.
Don't worry
Yeah,
about
so to kind of like put a cap on it, what we're saying here is the tolerances in wood, in the material, the nature of the material we're working with, and the tolerances required for joints to come together, and what would be like a good fitting joint is probably, I don't know, what would you give like a good slip fit mortise and tenon? How many thousandths range do we have before we either are too tight or too loose? I would give it like 8 or 9, maybe 10 thou before you start to even be able to tell the difference between that fit. Like, it's pretty significant. And then guess what happens when you put glue in there?
Glue. I was just going to think.
Like, it doesn't matter because it's all super tight at that point. So if you're somewhat new to this and you're putting a lot of money out and you're getting this machine, you're putting a little bit too much emphasis into the wrong area. I don't think it's that important. Get this thing set up the best you can, and then start cutting and making projects, and don't even worry about it. And then let the work dictate your calibrations from here on out. When you start to see problems, when you detect problems, or you're getting wood catching on something, right? That's when you need to address it. At this stage, just let it go. I think it's time to let it go.
Mark, I think you should email Daryl Peart and William Ng. Like when I think of precision woodworkers, those are the two names that come to mind. Mm-hmm. I want to know how out of flat their table saws are.
I feel like there are two examples of people who would be writing the same emails to SawStop.
That's kind of my, you're right.
And they're going to keep getting them until they get one that's flat, damn it.
Keep them coming. I'm going to check them all.
Unfortunately, the problem with that argument is look at their work. And it's like, okay, fine. Maybe
you can't argue with that. They must
maybe
be
that's why my
right.
work doesn't look that good. That's it.
I could see them like going there and like
to pick the right one
and picking one out. I could see that. Like, let me
here,
open
Mr. Ng,
boxes.
come in and pick
Let
your
me get
table.
my feeler gauges and my precision straight edge, and I'm gonna check all of these to find the one I like. And you're gonna let me do it, and you're gonna be happy about it.
For your average woodworker, if there is a tool I could tell you could probably throw away and never miss, and in fact will do you a lot of favors, it would be a set of feeler gauges. I have them, but they usually get me into more trouble than things that they solve for me. So anyway,
floss with them. They're good for flossing.
Yeah, there you go.
You can check your tooth gaps.
That's true. I don't actually know how gappy mine are, but now I'm going to. So there's that. All right. Well, that's going to do it for us today. Remember, the show is made possible by the generous contributions of our patrons. And if you'd like to help out and get your name read on the show, also, you can get that ad-free version of the show. Head over to patreon.com/woodtalk.
Yeah. And send us some questions. I got to say, maybe it's because we took the summer off, but I also think y'all took the summer off because the inbox is starting to look a little sparse.
Lazy.
I mean, granted, we can like click through to like the second page, in Gmail. It just shows you the first page. I don't ever click to the second page.
You don't want
I haven't noticed how many pages are down there. So there's probably a lot in the inbox.
Just like the web search.
Yeah, right. Nobody cares about what's on page 2. So yeah, send us some questions. Go to woodtalkshow.com. There's a form there, or you can just email us at woodtalkshow@gmail.com. And now that the show's back, there might actually be something to look at on Instagram. I don't know.
I doubt it.
Just
be painting.
Wood Talk Show as well on Instagram. Come find us.
Okay.
We're here again. We're back.
We're back, baby. We're back. All right. Well, thank you for listening, everybody, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye-bye.
Toodaloo.
Sorry again.
Toodles.